Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Constructive Criticism. It's episode 492, and I gotta say something, Abe. Does it look like Do I look like a guy that just took another job in software with the haircut and the plaid? And I looked at my look
It's
today.
the plaid that sells it.
It's just
The plaid is 100%. Congratulations on staying a tech bro. You did it. I think even the fact you pushed the hair up just a little bit more today to go with it, it really sells the vibe. You're gonna crush it.
So, fun fact, this is actually what my hair does naturally. There's no product in it today. I usually comb it over a little bit, have it shorter, but the lady at the barber shop, she's cutting my hair and she's like, the last notes that we have from you are from 2019. And I was like, yeah. She's like, what do you mean, yeah? I was like, yeah, I've had the same haircut since 2019. What do you want from me right now? So then, she's cutting it and she's like, okay, you want to do this? I was like, no, don't take anything off the top. And she's like, well, I wish you'd have told me earlier. I would have done something different with your hair. And I was like, well, we can next time. But you already guilted me into not doing what I was going to do. So now we're going to do something.
We can next time. In 5 years.
Too funny. It was an always improving moment for me. So you gotta mix it up. It's just hair. It grows back if you don't like it. I happen to have loved it. Just like I love this segment, Always Improving, on the show. Every week we talk about things that we've been doing to improve lately. And I kind of took a break, to be honest. I don't know if I said it on the show last week that I was accepting a new job offer. But I start a new job, time of recording, tomorrow morning. Very excited about it. And kind of just took time, I birded some challenges. I did my normal stuff. But as far as how much Magic that I was playing in Standard, the weeks leading up to this, where I was playing probably an event a day at the very least. I really took a step back. Played some video games. Got some stuff done for my nerd channel. Just really honed in on making sure that I'm prepared to have a job, continue doing content, stuff like that, while also being a dad and preparing to do onboarding work for a full-time job, stuff like that. So I think that we don't say it enough when we do take those moments away from I have all this prep. I'm already in a pretty good place in Standard. I have a Standard RCQ this weekend that I'm going to play in. After that, I got to prep for a team trios event, stuff like that. Decided I'm skipping Denver. I was going to go and try to LCQ, but with a new job, I'm not going to, so I don't have to really focus on as much stuff. But those moments need to happen. I think that we'll probably get into it later in the show, wink wink, with our special guest, Steven Dykman. But burnout's real, and if you put yourself in a position to just tear yourself apart, it's not going to be successful. So
yeah, I mean, it seems like it's oh, well, you didn't do anything to get better at Magic. What's make me better at Magic when I'm not freaking out because I'm way behind and making sure I'm ready to do my job, right? Being able to have that taken care of in advance and being set up to have that on ramp and still have that time to push it just makes you a better Magic player. Having your house in order makes everything a lot easier. As for me and my always improving moment this week, I spent a lot of time as I'm kind of balancing the preparing for the Pro Tour in Pioneer and preparing for the RC in Modern. I spent a lot of time playing different Modern decks, and specifically Rhinos, a deck that I had not played a lick of in its entire time in Modern. Around the time that it was the best, a deck that people would play, I was kind of down on it. Didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I was really having a good time playing Hammer. And I played against it quite a bit in my time playing Modern, but I never played with it. And especially, this is my first time really touching Modern in that capacity, outside of just playing jamming Scam since Tidebinder came out, and also since playing decks that aren't just Scam with the One Ring in the format. So it's been a really, really cool learning experience to just start to get another deck under my belt and really learn the ins and outs of it, because currently, especially on the heels of what we talked about in our episode last week about Modern, I think it still is one of the two best decks. I mean, as of the time of recording this, I believe it won every Modern challenge over the weekend, or at least won like two or three of the major events over the weekend on Moto. I know one of them was a Rhino's Mirror, um, and it just seems to be a really good deck that's really well positioned. Good time for me to be getting into and starting to get the reps, and so that's what I really focused on in terms of things. In addition to my time I've been spending just kind of doing the rounds in Pioneer, trying out different decks and different strategies, and kind of honing in on what I think is going to be like well positioned, or what's needing what ahead of the new set coming out. But that's been most of my week. It's been like a pretty pedestrian, like, oh, I just started learning the best, like what is considered the best deck in Modern, but got to do it eventually, and it's been pretty impressive so far.
I love it. I also think that like it's really easy when you're in a deck for like a season, right? To have like the evolutions of other things happening. You really can only focus on like what's impacting you. And as you like pick up a deck, and this is what we say, all the time on the show, right? Is like learning a new deck teaches you things about that deck that you can learn in no other way. And so I don't know. I think it's a good perspective to always try to get. All right. If you want to support the show, one of the best ways to do that is go to patreon.com/ccmtg. Become a patron yourself. We really appreciate it. Like, it's the coolest thing. I really love seeing the community. Abe, you gave a huge shout out last week on the show to the Discord, and just like the value that you feel like that Discord is bringing. And what was funny enough is like literally in coaching, I brought up like somebody was like, "Oh yeah, I'm like thinking of playing Yeoman 5's deck." I was like, like you're already a patron in our Discord. Do you know that he did like a whole thread in our Discord about this deck and talk to people? And I just think that like building a community with that type of value is just really cool.
Yeah, and that's something that we, not to spoil the surprise here and what we talk about in the interview, but a big theme and what we talked about with Steven that you're going to hear after this is just the community and the ability to have a network. And the Patreon Discord is a really good jumping off point for you if you feel like you need that or want just another place to bounce ideas off of players who are hungry and working on it actively. And it continues to be that way. I've had people who approach me for coaching, and I'm like, if this is, if this is good, but it's not like, something you consistently do, you're gonna get a lot of bang for your buck out of it. So yeah, continues to be the best. I'm hyping it up. 2024 is the year of the Patreon Discord. Everybody get in.
I love it. It's also the year of our amazing sponsor over at untap.gg. Use the link in the show notes to use our affiliate link. Also, like, that's just something that comes up for me so much. I'm lucky enough that because of the sponsorship, I've got a pro account on there for the CCMTG account that I get to use. And like, it came up as I was like drafting the other day. I posted this in the Discord, but I don't know if you saw my 7-0 draft that I was like, is this the worst draft deck in history? And people were like, no, it's fine. Like, you just don't have removal. And I was like, well, that makes it a pretty bad draft deck to me. But, you get the insights from Untap.gg right there while you're drafting if you're like trying to learn how to do a draft format and things like that. As well as, I've always said like just the being able to like look up like, okay, what's in my deck really quickly as I'm going through games, things like that. Just the plugin is really cool. So check that out. Let's dive in though to our main topic with our guest, Steven Dykman. And welcome our guest here, NRG champion, NRG player of the year, but more importantly to me, and something I gotta initially just jump off the bat for, 2-time state champion Steven Dykman. Steven, I gotta ask, what years, man? I got 2 behind me too, so I gotta know what 2 years.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to give me a sec here. I have to look that up, man. It's been a long time. That was like early in my career. I think that was TCG Player, if I remember right, who ran those.
Yeah.
So I got one from Champs, but I don't remember. It was like end of Champs. So I don't know.
Give me a sec here. That's a great question.
Too deep of a cut? Did I go too deep there, Abe?
I mean, once the NRG Series Player of the Year, you forget about the state championship.
Yeah,
that was the old. We're in a bigger realm here.
We're definitely way back in the day. Let's see. All right, here's states 2015. So almost 10 years ago. I was I
Oh,
was
don't say that, I'm
19
so
at
old.
that time. So really long time ago. I played green white tokens, I think. Let me click this. I
That
remember
sounds about
this.
right.
I remember
Gideon,
this. Yeah,
Nista,
Wingmate Rock.
Evolutionary Leap,
Yep,
Avacyn.
Deathmist Raptor, Gideon, Dromoka's Command, Silk
Oh, the
Wrap.
Deathmist Raptor deck. The Elvish Mystic
Uh-huh.
Deathmist, Magic Ord. Yeah.
Yep, Avatar the Resolute was in this one. Warden of the First Tree, Hangerback
Is that your
Walker.
second state champion or your first one?
I think that was my
Oh, your first. Oh,
first.
that was like that deck sounds like the Rally era deck. That was the green white scales deck.
Yeah, it might have been. Let me see.
If you got Avatar the
Yeah.
Resolute, that was a deck that like popped up because it could clock the ramp decks, and like I just know too much about the standard because it was the first one I qualified for a PT in. But
Okay.
but that's like that was a deck that popped up like towards the end, right before the rotation, before Rally really popped up.
I'm gonna guess that I think this may have been my second one, to be honest, and I'm not sure what my first one was. It's not showing up on Goldfish, so probably even older than this.
Oh
But
man,
Got to dig through MTG top 8.
I guess
Right.
so. Yeah.
Where these
yeah.
things even exist
You got
anymore.
it's you. Yeah, there's different places you can find them. There, back in the day, the way that I found it was like you'd look up the SEG deck list dumps, but you could like sort by different tournaments. So,
Okay.
but darn, 2-time state champ, but now NRG Player of the Year and champion. Steven Dykman, that was deep enough cut. How are you doing, man?
Pretty good, dude. It was a really exciting last weekend for me, obviously. This weekend was pretty nice too, honestly, with the Lions winning their first playoff game in 32 years. There's not a lot of winning that goes on in Detroit, especially in the NFL. So that was really, really cool to see yesterday. But yeah, I'm feeling really good. It was obviously a really, really exciting weekend. Both my teammates, Chris Smith and Kyle Gonzalez, were also in the uh, on the field of 16 too. So our team, Switch Gaming, had a really, really good year, and Kyle was made it all the way through to top 8 with me too, which was really, really cool. And both Chris and Kyle have really good careers ahead of them, I'm pretty sure, if they stay involved in the game. So it was really, really cool. The entire experience was awesome. But obviously winning it, really really made it feel even better. But
So you kind of started out the year pretty hot and kind of just got to like ride the wave a little bit. Can you talk about
Yep.
that really quick?
Yeah, so yeah, that first weekend, obviously win both events, and then that was really nuts. That gave me a nice lead for most of the year. And then yeah, the rest of the season was, I mean, the next event I think was Minneapolis, if I remember correctly, and the first event I played a deck that I had been streaming, which was and it was Pioneer. It was a Saturday event, so it was their 10K, I believe. And I played this like rack sack deck, but it had Voldaren Thrillseeker and Dreadhorde Butcher in it, so it was like a little different than the traditional rack sack builds. But I did think the deck was a lot better into like Lotus Field, which is why I played the deck. Dreadhorde Butcher is really good at just like winning the game. The deck had like potential turn 4 kills because you could go. I forget if you went turn 2 Dreadhorde Butcher and then Voldaren Thrillseeked the Butcher on 4. It was like, I think, exactly 20 damage through the 2 attacks the Butcher would do, and then the damage, and then throwing it at him on turn 4. So you had like a much quicker clock than normal Racksack, which was pretty cool. But one of the big issues with the deck was that Dreadhorde Butcher is a much better card when you're on the play, and a much worse card when you're on the draw. And so that can kind of be an awkward card in a lot of other matchups. But anyway, the deck was still really good. I almost top 8'd that event. That was my first event actually where I met Fletcher Johnson, who ended up being one of the players who ended up really competing for my first place spot at the end of the year. We were in a spot where it looked like we could maybe draw in, but he was a little bit on the bubble, so he ended up making us play with Lotus, and he was really, really a really good a Lotus player all year. He played at almost every event. He was by far my best Lotus opponent in that event. I think I played it 3 times, so I got pretty rewarded for playing that Dread Horde Butcher version of Racksack. I did go 2-1 against Lotus that weekend, but I did not beat him, unfortunately for me. So he top aided that one. I didn't. And then the next day, I played like this very bizarre Squadron Hawk, like modern deck that I honestly shouldn't have touched at all. But one of my buddies, Jordan Litsky, was like, "Hey, this deck's sweet. You should try it." And I'm like, whatever. I've got to put good point lead. I'll have fun this weekend with this modern deck. And it was a cool deck, but it was just, it was basically just a way worse version of four color. And when I played against four color, I'm over here casting Squadron Hawks, and my opponent's casting Omnaths and Karugas and drawing just way more cards.
I remember this deck because somebody sent me your list in coaching, and I was like, I don't know what this is, man. Like, so,
dude, it's a pile. It's a pile.
It's so funny because like people are like, what do you think about like when somebody like, what do you think that like this says that somebody of this caliber would like be playing this, and you're like, you don't know why he played this deck. You have no idea.
Yeah, the reason, I mean, I traditionally love the like white, dirtily, derpy mid-range piles in Modern. I think they're a lot of fun. Even not in Modern, there's like one that Claudio has been playing recently in Standard, and now some other people have started picking it up, where it's like basically last season's white mid-range deck, but they splash black for Breach the Multiverse and some other stuff. And on my most recent stream, actually, we played that deck, and it was very good. Made it like top 500 a Mythic on Arena, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I really like those kind of decks. I would not advise anybody to pick up that deck. Probably it's certainly not a tier 1 deck in Modern. If you're trying to have fun and that deck looks fun to you, go for it. But if you're trying to win tournaments, that is almost certainly not the right deck to play. And I kind of knew that going into that weekend, so it was probably just not a great deck to pick up for that weekend. But I had a nice point lead. I wanted to have fun. At that time, I had not found a modern deck I really enjoyed. Obviously, I did win that event with Rhinos, but I honestly do not like Rhinos very much at all. I think that deck is quite boring. I just think that it's really powerful, but I think there is certainly a limit to like how many actual decisions you get to make in that deck. There's some interesting ones, but overall, especially at that time, you didn't have Flame of Anor yet. You didn't have Tidebinder yet. So it was a lot of just like, does my opener have a cascade effect? Does it have a Shardless Agent or a Violent Outburst? If it doesn't, I'm going to mulligan. And that was, kind of the extent of your gameplay in a lot of game ones, which I don't really enjoy that much. I don't know. But yeah, so that's anyway why I played that white deck. And then I won't go into huge detail about all the tournaments I played this season, but yeah, I kind like you said, I kind of rode the wave. I went to all the events. Most of them I did pretty well in. I had a few pretty bad ones. Detroit in Modern was really bad for me. I went like 3-5 or something with Amulet. It was kind of a disaster. Kyle Gonzalez was doing his best to try and coach me and make me good at that deck. And I think I was like honestly fine with that deck. I definitely had some rough beats that weekend, but I'm obviously not the level he is, or even my one of my other two teammates, Dewey Vu, also plays a lot of Amulet. Definitely a deck I want to try and work on and get better in the future. It's a really good deck to have in your wheelhouse. But most of the events went pretty well for me, but a lot of the other players at the top were, they didn't have the kind of weekend I had necessarily, where I like won 2 in a row. Although Kyle Gonzalez was very close in Detroit. He won Modern and then he lost in top 4 to Ben Unger. And at the end of the season, that's a lot of the reason he took the point lead from me for about 18 hours on that last weekend. Is he also almost had a double championship weekend, which is obviously insane. But yeah, kind of rode the wave. Did typically very well in Pioneer. I had one where I didn't play Rakdos. I played Heroic. Had a pretty rough weekend, and then every other event I played Rakdos. I don't think I had a worse finish than X and 2 at any event with Rakdos. Yeah, it was a sweet season. Obviously pretty stressful at the end there when Kyle caught me for a day, and then a lot of people were really close, but that I brought Rakdos to that tournament, and I was like, well, I'm gonna bring the deck I'm most comfortable with. I know this deck is good. it had been doing really well at the Japan RC that weekend, despite the Quintorius deck taking off. Rakdos was still looking really good in Japan, so I was like, "Oh, playing this immediately." The Japanese think it's good. I believe them, so I'm going right back to it, and it ended up being really good. So I was happy with it. Almost top eighted that one. Lost to Robert Taylor, funny enough, in the last round of Madison to not top eight that. But fortunately for me, Fletcher Johnson also lost, so he did not take my top spot.
That's awesome, man. It kind of culminated in a pretty cool clip that I wanted to talk about. I'm sure that people have talked to you about this clip already, but let's talk about it.
Sure.
You have this moment at the last movie, you're like, oh, I guess I'm going to make the obvious blocks.
Yeah.
That's what you say, and then you go ahead and make the obvious blocks. What are you thinking at that exact moment?
Oh, dude, just so I don't know for the viewers if everybody could hear. Hobbs was basically talking through his combat for about, I would say, it felt like a really long time for me. It felt like an eternity because I'm just praying, please attack, please attack, please attack, because he's literally talking about how if I have a spell in my hand, he can only put me to 1. He's already done all the math. He's talking it out verbally, and he's obviously trying to figure out if he wants to make the attack. So if I have a spell and he's made it pretty obvious that he has nothing in his hand. If I have a spell and he has nothing, he will die in the crackback. So he's just like trying to figure out if he wants to attack. And the whole time I'm just trying to like not even look at him, just not try to signal that I have a spell or don't have a spell. And he eventually just says, "Screw it, I'm making the attack," and then makes the attack. And he's already walked through how I'm going to block and all this. So he had literally already said this was the obvious block. So that was why I said I'll make the obvious block, is because he had already, I'm not usually going to be the guy who's like, oh, I'm going to make the obvious block. But I don't know. It feels like a little bit of
I don't know. It was a good clip.
That's fair. But anyway, he already said that. That's why I said that. And then, yeah, obviously he had nothing, and I had the crackback for the win. So yeah, that was pretty crazy when he started talking about how he was going to make the attack. I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to win. It's like, but in both those games, like I thought I was going to lose both those games. I was miles behind in both. The first one especially, well, both of them I was crazy behind. The first one was really nuts though because I drew like 3 1-ofs in a row to even have a chance to win. I drew the 1-of Go Blank into the 1-of Croxa, I believe, into the 1-of Archfiend, just like 1-of all in a row, which was like so insane. But obviously it was pretty, for those that watched game 1, it was pretty not like I thought seized him. He was on a multi-6. I took his Fable. He top decks Thoughtseize, takes my Fable, and then top decks Bankbuster, which he had 2 of, and I had 4 of in my deck. So it was obviously pretty frustrating for me when he drew the Bankbuster, and then I don't have a Bankbuster, and then things start really slipping away in game 1. But it ended up all working out okay in the end. But it was not looking good for me in game 1 or game 2. I fell miles behind in game 2 as well. I drew all the Bankbusters instead of none of them, and got kind of flooded on them, and couldn't do all the things I needed to be able to do early, but was able to still hang around, and just barely get out of it. So
it was kind of funny because like I thought to myself while I was watching the clip, I was like, man, dude, me at the end of some of those long tournament days, like I think like all of us who have like been on the grind, like we could see ourselves in you a little bit there. Where like I'm the type of person that you'll see me at different times in the tournament. Like my hands are up here, my just depending on where my mental's at.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know. I could really see myself kind of you were the people's champion, at least to me in that moment.
Yeah, man. I was definitely feeling some amount of pressure. In the especially on day 2. But it was really, for me, it was just all day I was just trying to think to myself, okay, you just got to play well, just don't make mistakes, play clean, and hopefully things will work out. And I think I did a pretty good job of that overall. I maybe could have played a little better in some spots, obviously, as I'm sure anybody in the room could say that about some amount of games. But overall, I think I played pretty well, and yeah, like I've said a few times, things definitely broke my way when I needed them to. You kind of need that to win that that caliber of tournament. I mean, there were a lot of very, very good players in that room. I think there were already 3 or 4 players qualified for the Pro Tour before I got the qualification there. So just a really, really, really talented room of Magic players. And I'm not gonna lie, I was I was a little relieved that I didn't have to take on Raja in the finals too. He's my friend. I want to see him win, but he's always a really hard guy to beat. Always one of the best players in the room. So it was a little bit of relief when I saw that I was playing against Hobbs instead of him. And I had also done a lot of testing with Raja too, so we just like we knew each other's. It would have been just harder because he would have known like my game plans and stuff and some of the matchups. So
Fair.
So something that the NRG series really has since like lockdown and then kind of the release of that has been like the circuit in the US that's been, as far as like coverage and everything, the SCGs have kind of fallen off there.
Yep.
But it was really cool seeing how much turnover there was year to year. Now this is the second real year of there being the champs and everything in a full uninterrupted season. And I know that you were kind of a player who was at a lot of them last year ahead of this champs. And then what's that kind of been like as far as the culture of the scene there? Like, has it been a lot of those players who were in it in 2022 into 2023 were
most of them are still there, some are not, but yeah, I mean it's a pretty consistent group, especially at the top there. It's a really, really fun event series. I really like Norm. He's the tournament organizer and the owner of NRG, I believe, and really cool guy. If you would have, it's funny because if you would have told me like 6 years ago or whatever that, because NRG was a thing then, but it was like the really small circuit at that time. If you would have told me 6 years ago I'd be qualifying for the Pro Tour from NRG, I would have said you were insane. You know, I used to like not, I used to skip NRGs to go play like any of the other series, right? Because at the time, it made more sense for me to do that as a player whose goal was to get back to the Pro Tour. NRG was not at that time the series where that was, what made sense for me to do. Like, yeah, I could go like win a 5K or whatever it was, or but it to me that didn't really matter. To me, I wanted to be at the bigger tournament. So initially, I was really invested in GPs way back in the day. I didn't even put like a ton of focus into SCG at first either, because I was really, really trying to grind the Grand Prix circuit and get back on the Pro Tour. But yeah, so it's really cool to see how much they've grown, and hopefully they will continue to do that. They're a really cool tournament series, and it's awesome that we still have something to go do, because like you said, SCG is certainly fallen off a little bit, and they're just the entire structure of how they do things is just miles different than what it used to be. I will say though, it'll be interesting to see now. SCG, I think, is in
they have
charge
the
of
regional
RCs.
championships.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what that is like, and if that like kind of brings them back a little bit. I'm really interested to see how everything will happen there. But
It's so funny. You kind of, I guess you really already touched on this, but I was kind of curious, kind of looking at doing research for having a guest on the show. I guess one of your featured matches that came up was on the SCG tour, and I'm kind of curious, like how much of the energy and what they're doing now spoke to you because of the way the SCG tour was back in the day.
Oh, I mean, it's very similar. Honestly, it's I think the players at the top, I think, are equally as talented as a lot of those SCG grinders were, and it feels to me, kind of like SCG when SCG was still, because there was a time where SCG was obviously a little smaller than what it eventually became. It eventually became like a pretty huge series. But when I was like first getting into Magic, like SCG was even still kind of in that like growing stage. And it kind of feels like that, it's and I hope to I hope to see the tournament series keep getting bigger. And like I said, it's really nice that we still have a series that we can go play in, and it's especially good that there's a pro tour invite attached to it, because that, for me, like I qualified for my last pro tour almost 7 years ago, and I've been trying to get back ever since. And so, the fact that there was this pro tour invite on the line is why I so diligently went to every single event this season. I remember when I figured out when I found out that there was a pro tour invite attached to this championship, because the last one they didn't have they just got it this year for this series for the championship. It was I was really excited about that, and I think that was this. I found it out the same weekend I won the back to backs, and I was like, "Holy smokes! This is huge. This is even bigger than I thought it was." I thought it was just like, a really good clout type thing or whatever. But at the time, I kind of just went to that tournament to have a good time and
Yeah.
play some Magic. It was shortly before RC San Diego, um, but yeah, was obviously awesome. So
Let's kind of take a trip down memory lane. I'm kind of
sure.
curious, like, thinking back on it, is there anything you learned this year, like really big learning moments that you can share with listener?
Yeah, so I think, for players that are really trying to level up and kind of progress in tournament series like this, or just in really big events. One thing that I think really helped me, um, especially going into this championships, and I did it a few times throughout the season as well, is when you feel like a deck is really well positioned in the format, like I felt, for example, Murktide was going into this tournament, and I did earlier on in this NRG season as well. I think it's really important to recognize people that you may know, or people that you can reach out to that will be willing to help you and give you some advice on those decks, because obviously I've kind of alluded to this. One of my like big specialties, I think, in Magic is just like the black mid-range decks in general. That's typically my best archetype in any given format. So like I said, Rakdos mid-range is one that I'm like super comfortable with. Don't think I need a ton of input from other people on to really know what I'm doing. But decks like Murktide, decks like Amulet, like I was talking about, it's important to be able to reach out to other players and kind of ask them, hey, what are the card choices I should maybe make this weekend if I expect this meta game? Why would I do that? Can you kind of walk me through this? I reached out to both Sarah Sehiring and Twinless Twin before this past weekend to try and get their input on Murktide, because Sarah was my opponent when I won the modern event with Rhinos. She was my opponent in the finals, and then I did some testing with her for some of the RCs as well. And then obviously uh, Max Twinless Twin plays Murktide just all the time. It's like his bread and butter. So I reached out to him too, and was just kind of asking them both, what cards make sense in the sideboard if I expect this to be the given metagame. Why would it make sense over other cards, stuff like that. Just trying to gain an understanding. Um, and then I would say Murktide was the deck I was like most worried about going into the event, because I had the least reps with it. And as we were talking about before the podcast today, I really feel like Murktide is very decision dense. There's a lot of decision points in Murktide, which is pretty different than say like Rhinos, like I was talking about earlier, or like sometimes Scam. There are not a ton of decision points. You keep your grief hand, you take the two obvious good cards in their hand, and then you kind of play a top deck for. Murktide's not that way. Murktide, you're casting stuff like Preordain, you're casting Expressive Iteration. You always need to be aware what cards you're drawing to. It's really important to know what you're looking for. So I think it's really important to have reps in with that deck. So I really tried to test that one really aggressively before the event, so I felt comfortable casting cards like Preordain and Expressive Iteration, and just really knowing what cards I needed when I needed them. And I think I did a pretty good job of that. I think I played Murktide more than anything else. I only played 2 rounds of Standard, so I played Modern and in most of my event, or most of my matchups over the past weekend. So it did pay off pretty well.
Are there any mistakes from the last year that you like wish you could go back and be like, Steven, like,
Well,
come on, man.
we talked about that mono white Squadron Hawk pile. That was probably that one would definitely be, I would consider, a mistake. That was me me being a little bit arrogant, I think, and playing a deck and not actually, not just playing a good deck. I should have just played a deck that made more sense. That was me just kind of spewing points on the leaderboard, which could have cost me at the end because it was really, really close. Um, but other than that, I mean, like I said, I tried playing Heroic at one of the tournaments, and I generally believed Heroic was a good deck going into that weekend. I had a really bad read on what the metagame was going to look like. Typically, at that time, NRG had a lot of mono green presence, and I expected that to continue going into that weekend because mono green had just done very well in a super on Moto. But it was interesting because mono green, like the week before, had done terribly at RCs. But I thought that the paper metagame would catch up with the moto metagame. But that was not the case at all. People just kind of ignored that moto result, stuck with the, oh, mono green is bad because it did bad at an RC, and almost nobody was on mono green in the entire room. So I thought Rakdos was going to be down that weekend, and mono green would be, at the same level or up. And it was actually like the total opposite. Mono green was almost not in the room at all. And then Rakdos was super popular, which is typically one of the harder matchups for Heroic. So round one, I get paired into A. Adams, who at the last tournament I had played them. They were on mono green, and they revealed Gigantha and played like a witch's oven on turn one. I'm like, oh my god. So
Those are
yeah,
hard days.
yeah, those are hard days. It's like, well, it is what it is. Sometimes you don't have the right meta read. But fortunately, I did have a pretty good read into champs, which is when it mattered the most, I guess. So you win some, you lose some, and that weekend was definitely an example of me losing on the meta call.
I gotta ask, like, this will be something that, like, you'll be like, 80 years old, and when I was blah blah blah, right? Like, it's an experience that you'll have your whole life.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, what do you hope people can take away or learn from this year for you?
I mean, I think it's if you enjoy playing Magic as much as I do, just stick to it, keep playing, keep grinding away. Um, I didn't really do anything, crazy special. I played games to prep for these tournaments. I think one really big thing that helps me be successful and has helped me be successful for the past, like 5 years or whatever, longer than that even, is I'm very thankful for the people, the resources that I have, the people I know. Team Swish provides me with cards. My teammates are the ones who own all these cards. It's never I hardly own any cards at all. So it's been a really imperative thing for me throughout my career that I have these friends and resources and people who help me out and provide me with the things I need. So that's been really big. And obviously they also help me a ton, like just getting in games and learning decks and all that. So I'm very thankful for my friends and teammates, but above all else, they're my friends and they have my back and they're the real people behind all this. And my family, my girlfriend, all the people who are behind the scenes supporting me doing what I love to do. It's that's, I think, really key. It's really key to have a good support system, and I do indeed have that. So, but yeah, I think that's a really big thing for me.
I love that one. Kind of my next question was, what does somebody do to be in your seat next year? We had the NRG champion on last year. We got you on this year. And what's really funny is we actually had Jess on last year too.
Oh, okay.
And she talked a lot about the series, and then we had Connor on, and it like I think that people, one thing that I think Magic players have a problem with is like diminishing other people's like accomplishments or like this.
There's a lot of that, which is, I mean, that's unfortunate, but that's, when you really think about it, and I don't mean to interrupt here.
No,
but
no, you're
that's,
good. I just think that like there is also a group that like is looking at you as like, I want to be where
Right.
where Steven is next year. And what would you say to those people?
Play a lot of games, find a support system, find a group of people that will help you reach your goals. And just play a lot, but don't, it's also important to not burn yourself out. Like, I don't, I played a lot before champs, but like a lot of those NRGs, I'm lucky. I have the opportunity that I get to just stream the game for 6 hours a day, so I get a lot of games in just from doing that. So I don't do a ton of testing outside of stream time if I can help it. I'll do it for like really big events, like for the Pro Tour. I have a testing team. I'll be playing with them off the stream and stuff like that. But it's important to not burn yourself out. And that's that's so don't get too crazy, but make sure you're getting in games, and like I said, above all else, kind of find that support system. But to go back to your point about how a lot of Magic players do diminish certain accomplishments, that I don't even think that's necessarily completely a Magic player thing, right? I think that's like, to me, that kind of feels like a competition thing. Like, you see that a lot in sports too, right? Like, analysts and stuff, I hate to rub it into any Cowboys fans here or whatever, but like, the Cowboys have made the playoffs for like the last like however many years, right? But now they're like talking about firing their coach and all this stuff because they lost in the playoffs, and maybe that's the right thing for them to do, maybe it's not. But it really, it's all in perspective. What you how you want to, how I think what matters with accomplishments is just like, how do you view them, right? It doesn't really matter how other people view your stuff. Like, at the end of the day, I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish this year, and maybe some people will diminish it, maybe they won't. But I think it's just, if it's an accomplishment to you, if going to your FNM and 5-0ing your FNM is an accomplishment for you, then that's awesome. And that, if that's where you're at, and a goal that you have, then hold your head high and be proud of it. And it's just important to, I just kind of ignore the outside stuff. And if you're accomplishing your goals, then you should be proud of that. I think that's really important.
I really love that you said that. I have some people in coaching where it's like, honestly, your number one problem right now is your confidence and your negative self-talk. And like that isn't fixed through coaching. Like, that's actually,
no.
It's like
that's mental.
Yeah, that's something you need to like be able to go in and say, like, you need to go in and say what your goals are, what your aspirations are, and when you do something right, like, give yourself the same amount of praise that you are really hard on yourself when you're negative. And I think that it's hard to do that, right? Like, I don't know about all of our listeners, but I know for the three of us and how long we've been playing, there was a long time where Magic got really self-negative, and like, it was cool to be self-negative, right? And I agree with you that like competition also, that like when the Lakers won the championship in the bubble, people were like, it doesn't even count. And it's like, that's not how this works.
Exactly. There's always that though with competition, right? I've followed sports my entire life. It's probably my biggest love outside of Magic is sports. And it's always that way. Every year, every sport, no matter what it is, if you don't win it all, and then even if you win it all, then the expectation is that you win it all again. And if you don't, you're not meeting expectations. It's just like, people always want more, right? And that's, so it's important to just, like you said, set goals, make sure they're realistic goals as well. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that somebody's goal should be win series MVP and win championship. That's a really, really tough goal. And yes, I was able to accomplish that, but like I've said before, I had to get pretty lucky along the way in multiple spots. Like, I may very well never do it again. It's not an easy thing to do, but your goal, in my opinion, should be, and what's really my goal with the game typically is going into any game, any match, just play well, just play your best, have a game plan, and just try and execute the way you need to, because at the end of the day, you can't win every game in this game. That's just not how Magic works. There are plenty of unwinnable games, and it's really important to not get down on yourself when you're losing those games. So that's I think a pretty big thing.
Yeah, I love
Oh, go ahead.
to just like there's a real spirit there. I think that when you see players who, like, you're talking about your finals match against Hobbs, right? Like,
Yeah.
the two of you are like longtime veterans of various circuits and have both played pro tours, both with some really, really great finishes. And I think something that really I found from interacting with you or the circles around like you guys, and more so with Hobbs, I worked with him for a bit back on the SCG tour, but just that energy of positivity towards like the grind and just engaging with it like entirely. You spoke a lot during this interview about like having that network of people that you can work with, and how even some of them came from just being opponents of yours in high leverage spots, right? Like Sarah being someone who played in the finals of the first event of the year, and that being just such a like the reason those connections are made being so linked to just showing up, trying your best, and like sometimes you have the results, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get to play against that player or watch that player play and like ask them why they did something during that match. Like actually just showing up, being involved, and being part of the scene really is just like step one to having that network and being able to take that shot. Like I see it, especially like it's really cool, especially from my position for the first time really as like an East Coast player being outside of the most like prominent scene in the US. Like the NRGs are too much for me to get to, whereas before like the SCGs, no matter what, I'd hit like 4 or 5 a season just because they were all like sub 4-hour drives for me.
You privileged children.
It really had it so good for so long. But seeing from the outside, I get to see like these squads, these 2 or 3, 4 or 5 players start to really push each other to grow, and it really, I think especially for players who are the players who might have started playing over COVID or reconnected with Magic over COVID and started wanting to take it more competitively, especially seeing things like the NRG Series, hearing stories like yours, getting back to the Pro Tour after what you said was 7 years. My queue, I queued in Dallas. I'm playing also Chicago because I had to defer, but that's set. It's like 6.5 years the time I'm actually playing the PT for my last one too. So I know what that feeling is, but it's really to get a chance to relive that or re-engage that and see it all in the same way so many years removed starts with just the fact I know all these names, the people who are always at the top towards the leaderboard, comes from the fact that I do that, and really anyone could. If you spend the time and you try to engage and you come in showing that you want to get better and you're providing that value to the people around you too, and just trying to make those connections, 9 out of 10 times people respond well to that. So really great to hear that's the spirit. Really feeling that makes me want to go get some plane tickets to some NRGs maybe if time works out after.
Yeah, man, I would highly recommend it. It's a really fun series, and I fully expect that it will continue to grow. And I do think it's a pretty highly competitive circuit. I really do. I think I think the top tables are filled with a lot of very good players at any given event. I don't know about you, Abe, but the most recent PT qualification for me means a lot more than the first ones did. I'm really excited about this one. When I qualified for my first one, I think I was like 19 or something, and at the time I didn't even know what the Pro Tour was. I literally just went to a tournament with. I've alluded to him once already. I went with Dewey Vu. He just like asked me at a local FNM if I wanted to go to a tournament on a Saturday, and I was like, "Oh, sure, man, I'll go." And I didn't even know it was a PTQ until after I won the tournament, and then that was the start of my PT.
Those are my favorite old school PTQ stories. Like,
yeah, dude.
The number of people who have those. But meanwhile, like, I top aided like I don't even know how many PTQs before I got my first invite. Like,
okay, that's so funny, man. Yeah, for me it was. Yeah, I mean, it's for anyone who knows me, it's like it's kind of fitting. I'm kind of aloof about many things some of the time, but yeah, it was just it was obviously really cool to to qualify and do it that young. But at the same time, I definitely was not like ready for what I was getting into. I had no at that time I had like no network at all, so I didn't really test with anybody. Um, and getting cards was a huge issue for me, especially because it was block constructed. People didn't really have block constructed decks, so just like this 19-year-old kid trying to figure out how to like first build a block constructed deck. I'd like figure out a deck that I thought made sense, and then getting the cards and all that was pretty tough. And then obviously the level of competition, nothing really F&M does not quite prepare you for a pro tour. So it's I played against a lot of big names at my first PT. I think I played against Brad Nelson, I played against Rob Marr, and I played against gosh, why am I blanking on him? A really good Brazil Paulo Vita de Rosa. And so
just one of the goats.
yeah, just one of the best
just
ever.
the GOAT, just the LeBron James of Magic.
Yeah, definitely up there. If he's not that, he's certainly in the argument. But yeah, anyway, it just so it's but like we were talking about, having that network is really important. And yeah, anyway, I'm very, very excited to play it. That clip that you're referring to, a lot of the me putting my hands on my head and the reaction is like, this is really happening. I qualified for the Pro Tour again.
Dude,
it's been a long wait, but
that's so
I'm
funny.
really excited
as you were telling the story, about like him like making his attacks and stuff like that, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go to the Pro Tour. Like,
yeah,
like it's so funny to me because I really resonate. Man, you're just my people's champion. Because when I qualified, I played a Scryland, and I saw that there was a Crater's Claws on top of my deck.
Oh yeah.
And so I had to wait like a full turn cycle, like. So that moment of anticipation, I'm shaking now. I love
That's
it,
so
dude.
funny, man.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, those moments, I wish I could live in them for a little bit longer sometimes. In the moment, I'm like, my heart's pounding.
No, you don't.
Yeah, but nah, because here's the thing, Spencer. Every time you go back to live in, when you live in them, and after when you qualify, it's so good. You like, I don't know. It's like being in the eye of the storm, because on the other side, it's just so. It's where you start to realize it's.
That's
like,
a really good.
real.
It's a really good comparison.
That was like, because I don't know. Think about mine, like my journey for my 3 Pro Tours. Like my first one, it was just like. Everything was. I was playing a rally mirror, and then like on game 2, I just like slam an Fenza. They don't have a reflector mage, and I'm like, this is it. We're riding it out. We're good, and like, I don't know. The moment when you shake the hand, when you know you're gonna get to shake the hand, oh.
I always said there needs to be more actual pop-offs in MTG. For what it's worth, like I know people are like, oh no, it's BM. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, think of how many hours of blood, sweat, and tears, like. Steven, you've probably put into this game. Like you just said, it's been 7 years since your last Pro Tour. Like
7 years since my last Pro Tour, and now I stream. King. I've been streaming for 2 years, so I play Magic, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. So yeah, you do the math. It's and then I play obviously when I'm not streaming too. It's to say I've dedicated my life to Magic the Gathering would almost be an understatement to some degree. I really do love the game. I have a really good time playing it. I enjoy it typically quite a bit, and it's it is really cool to have all that work pay off and get to play in one of the biggest tournaments outside of Worlds. It's the biggest thing you can play in. So ultimately that is my goal, is to someday play at Worlds. So
yeah, so I was going to ask as my kind of final question here was going to be, obviously you've had like 2023 for you in the NRG series and everything. Probably going to be a hard one to top.
It will be
in terms of goals, right? Like to do both, right? Like you have to play really well and run pretty good to get a chance to even win the leaderboard, and the same thing to win a 16-man tournament of that caliber. So with a Pro Tour invite to start your year, right? Just end of February, playing in Chicago. What's your goal to move forward in 2024? What is it that you're shooting for?
Well, my most immediate goal is day two, the Pro Tour. My first 2 Pro Tours, the first one I qualified for, I actually 3-5'd. I was very close to day 2ing that one. And then my second one was a train wreck. I 0-5'd and dropped after that. So my goal for myself is to hopefully day 2 this one. But like I said, play well. I mean, that at the end of the day, the thing that you can control when you play this game is you play well, and hopefully everything else will fall into place. I'm really excited to have a team for this one. We're gonna have like a draft house or whatever for a week, and I think that will help me a lot. That has definitely been my weaker points so far at the PT. I think I'm 1-5 in draft, so have not been good in limited at the PT. I will say I have improved a lot at limited since then. I think I became a much better limited player over COVID because I did just all sorts of drafting on Arena during that time. And obviously, Arena drafts are not the Pro Tour, but I do think just like my knowledge of how limited works is much, much deeper than it was at that time. And so I believe that I'm capable of day 2ing a Pro Tour, certainly. And I do believe that I am capable of, hopefully top 8ing a Pro Tour, but a lot of things will have to break my way, obviously, again, like they have in some of these other tournaments. But I do have a lot of confidence that I can do well. So I'm greatly looking forward to it, and it's it's a real opportunity that I'm excited to have.
Well, anything you want to say before we let you go?
Just thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Like I said, when you guys do post this, make sure you let me know so I can give you guys a shout out. And I've alluded to it a few times. I do stream weekly if anyone ever wants to check it out. I usually do Pioneer and Modern mostly. I'll be mostly focused on Modern and Pioneer, especially leading up to RC Denver and the Pro Tour. The Switch Gaming on Twitch, if anyone wants to check it out. Other than that, I greatly appreciate you guys for having me on. Like I said, thanks to those that are giving this a listen. Like I said, at the end of the day, the biggest thing that you can control in this game is just, how you play and how, like, you alluded earlier to the mental, like, control your thoughts too. Like it's important to stay calm and just try and play your best. And I think ultimately that's one of the most important things. And that has definitely been part of the reason for my success this year is, I think I'm pretty good at staying cool under pressure. And I think I'm typically pretty good at playing pretty reasonably. So, yeah.
Well, Steven, I love having you on. Thank you so much. And, I'll make sure that our listeners are cheering for you at the Pro Tour.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.
First, though.
Yeah. We'll see you in Chicago, Abe.
Dude, Abe, that was a fun interview.
It really was. Steven is like, and has always been like a pretty, I would say, silently positive force in the Magic community in terms of like, every time I've seen him at a Magic event, I've seen him smiling, and I feel like it really came through in that. And then you refer to him a lot as your people's champion, at least the NRG series there.
That's how it felt,
really,
man. That's how it felt.
Yeah.
What's so funny is I really feel like when somebody's really passionate about something, this is something that we talk about like a lot. This is something that I talk about a lot in the job that I do. in product management is that when you find the thing that you're passionate about, right, and like the thing that that gives you drive, especially in like my line of work, it makes it not feel like work. Like going to work is the exciting thing, and like there are so many people who burn themselves out, just like in Magic in my job, and he like you can it is contagious. You could feel it. Like I would want to be on a testing team with Steven. Like that would be like you could feel his. It's not like the same thing of like, oh, this person's like good at Magic. It's like he's going to bring that level of energy to try and lift up others around him. And I don't know. It was a really good interview.
Yeah, definitely cements the idea to me that we should just try to have the NRG Player of the Year on every year.
Yeah, I agree. If you want to ask a question to guests like Steven, you go to patreon.com/ccmpg. We, in the Discord, patrons of $5 or more get asked, every time we have a guest, what do you want us to ask this person? And then another way to support the show is to head on over to the YouTube video. There were some good comments this week. One of them was about doing it for the Otters, and I just, I appreciate that because the Otters are great. Abe, I think you're right. It was really funny this week. Adrian in the Discord was like, Spencer, if I hit the like button and comment today, what happens? Like, what animal am I helping? And I was like, oh, like obviously a baby otter will get a hold of his mother's hand for the first time. And I just, it worked, man. Like we got 11 likes compared to like our normal 4 likes when I tweeted that. So
you better start thinking of more animals, man. I'm seeing a little something happening here.
Well, I'm just saying, like today, you save a you. I don't know. I'll figure it out later. You gotta understand that like we have a special bond with animals on the show. Apparently, that if you leave a like, things like that could happen. Who knows?
We worked it out with Big Kangaroo.
Yeah.
That this episode, if you like and comment, you don't have to subscribe. By the way, we're just asking you to like and comment. You can not like if you want, but if you do, a Joey gets to get in a pouch for the first time.
Well, that's just great. That can't be true though, because
if that doesn't happen, I mean that you're putting kangaroos in danger by not doing that.
Hey, you do know that they live there while they're pregnant.
Well, like they get born and then they get
it's gonna jump back in for the first time.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
A Joey gets to get out of the pouch for the first time.
Oh, gets to see the world.
Yeah, gets to spread its big springy legs.
The other way, I mean, and you can leave awesome comments like, with Scam returning, why isn't Scales a better deck in the meta? That's a good question. I think that last week we talked a lot about data and like a lot about the different things, and I made a pretty strong statement on the show about like, hey, I think there's like 4 good decks. I think the rest of them are not reasonable decks at this point, and the data does say that like they are substantially better than the other decks. I don't think that doesn't mean that like Scales isn't good or that like Murktide isn't good. Like they are good decks. I was trying to emphasize like the delta between decks in Modern that hasn't happened since like the days of Deathrite Shaman. Like it's just been a long time since decks had that kind of delta, and I do think that Scales actually is a good deck.
Yeah, I think Scales is well within the bounds of a reasonable deck in the meta. I think that what's going to keep it from coming back in a way that it was before is that one of the things that set Scales apart was its ability to be a creature deck that was pretty resilient to Fury by way of how many onboard tricks it had with like Ravager and Scales itself, and it played really well off the top, which is good against Scam. But I think that with the prevalence of the One Ring out of the control decks, as well as like Yawgmoth, and also I think to an extent Rhinos being decks that just like Yawgmoth, something you don't really have many good methods of interaction with, which is a really hard place to be in. And Rhinos just has the potential to kind of play your game faster than you, like an interactive spell or 2 on your things before they can start spiraling out of control, and 10 power is like kind of hard because the Scales deck really thrives on having time to develop. Like like it does, and is really resilient to removal. Whereas I don't think that that's necessarily how the games are currently being settled. So, like, that's why Scales isn't necessarily a better deck. Like, it does gain, like, one of its better matchups. It is a hard deck for Scam to beat, but and Scam is on the rise. But I think that so many other decks that are already up there are some of the harder ones. You're not necessarily feeling like it's a home run every time. When Scales was on the rise previously, it was like Scam was 25% of any field you were playing or more, and Scales was like lights out against that deck and good against the other things. Now it's kind of like, okay, you've got another like good deck in the metagame you're good against, but you're still struggling at some of the top stuff, or it's not so good that it's worth the decks where you're really playing from behind. So like it's still a reasonable deck. It's still one I would register if it was what I had and what I felt good playing. I think it's still got a lot of game. It's still absolutely a playable modern deck by all stretches, but I don't think I'd see it have the same kind of rise it did, 2.5 months ago, to be like in the conversation as like, oh, this is a deck you got to make sure, like, it's a really good meta call. You should be playing it. It doesn't have that same kind of oomph right now.
That is going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you so much to Stephen for coming on. We really appreciate it. Shout out to Mason, who wasn't able to make it today, dealing with some family stuff. Don't forget, you can join the Patreon Discord. Get a lot of benefits like being able to ask questions to Stephen, getting input on even our content and stuff like that. So you can also join the public Discord for He's a Game Media. Both those links are just available, I think, in the show notes or just at constructivecriticism.com. One of the best ways to support the show, though, is just to like, subscribe, comment, things like that. And then you can follow us on Twitter at CCMTG. Where can people find you, Abe?
People can find me over at twitter.com/morenothings. I've said this before, but I'm currently on coaching hiatus through just like the Pro Tour and the RC. I just have a lot on my plate. So if you're someone who's interested in coaching, especially in dates starting in like March or later, you can let me know. But otherwise, I would suggest that you reach out to Mason or Spencer or whoever's your flavor, or join the Patreon Discord, and you can get some stuff there. But that's me.
Yeah, so definitely don't reach out to me. I'm not accepting people for coaching right now. I've already reached out to everybody who I am coaching, so this shouldn't be a shock to people that like, kind of moving my stuff around, making sure that with my new job that I am able to support the people that like helped support me, while I was in between jobs. And but Mason, I know that he has a little bit of stuff available before the RC, but he should open up a little bit more after the RC in Denver. So check him out. Shoot him an email and just title it coaching. What'd you learn on this week's show, Ed?
Oh, that Mason always wins. Look at this. He's getting all the he'll get all the coaching. No, I'm just kidding. I thought it was really, really interesting to learn that Steven is another player who, like myself, like had that big gap between PT invites and got to earn his recently, and really getting to share in that was a really cool thing, because I know exactly how that feels. At least from my perspective, like I know how big that can feel, and it's really good to hear that. I also have that story about him just like winning his first PTQ without knowing it was a PTQ. It astounds me. Like, that blows my mind. That was like, I didn't realize this thing that could happen to people. I'm so jealous. But yeah, that's that was some cool stuff. It was cool to get to know him a little bit better than I had from the years of playing SCGs and seeing him at events and stuff. And getting to, like I said, by the end of it, it's hard not to root for him as a player. He's really a player's player.
That's my biggest learning. Is like, I know who I'm rooting for, other than Abe at this coming Pro Tour. I just think that, like, we get to do the show and we get to talk to so many amazing people, and everybody's magic journey is so different from each other's. And then, but you have those moments, like the one that we talked about on the show today. Like, you talked about your rally moment. He talked about his blocking situation at this event. I talked about my creators closet. And it's like, we share this thing that nobody else can understand. It feels like trying to explain that moment to somebody else is pretty difficult if they haven't been in it before. And it just, I don't know, it brought me a lot closer to Steven, who I never met before doing the podcast with him, but also, like, just the Magic community in general. It's so easy for us to, like, you know, tear each other down and, like, get involved in whatever the current Twitter drama is of the week. But at the end of the day, like, we're all, you know, in the competitive scene really trying to fight for the same goal and, you know, to be the best Magic players that we could be. And it's just really cool.
Magic owns. That's what I learned this week. Magic undefeated.
Yeah.
Best game of all time.
I love it. Thank you everybody so much for listening. We'll see you guys on next time with another episode of Constructed Criticism.